NichBoy and welcome to Pocket for Wednesday, the 17th of August. Today on the show, Goose. It's been a while.
Is that how we start them now?
Yeah, we just go straight into it.
Great.
There's nothing else.
All right.
Now, we're here to talk about your segment on the show last night about entitlement.
Yes.
You're an entitled boy.
I'm mildly entitled.
Wow. I mean, the correct response there would have been, no, I'm not. But you're like, no, I am mildly entitled. Entitle yourself to explain what you spoke about on the show yesterday.
Certainly. So basically we covered the fact that I think more and more gamers these days are feeling entitled to games delivering what they want, not what the developer wants to give them. It got to the point where people were sending death threats to Hello Games and to Sean Murray, the game's creator himself, as well. So it was getting too serious.
And so, as an entitled boy, for your IMO, famously controversial, I am guessing you are pro-death threat.
No, I couldn't be. I mean, obviously, death threats are one of the most horrible things out there on the internet. They are, on a very serious note, they should be taken seriously, and I think people are using them now as this kind of like, this is as extreme as I can get to this opinion.
Yeah.
They're not seriously, I would hope that people are not thinking, this is how I could kill someone. They're saying, this is how angry I can get.
This is the base level, yeah, this is,
and that's
we can't go back from here.
And that's becoming acceptable, and that is not acceptable.
Yeah, and so, if you did not watch yesterday's episode of Good Game, in the description below there is a link to the IMO. So go watch that, and then come back here, and we'll finish this discussion. We'll wait. Alright, that's enough time. Our first comment comes in from I Am an iPod, who says, I don't think that it's just 50% of gamers are assholes. I think more people than ever are gamers, and people in general are just assholes surrounded by meaty bits. So we're starting off strong there. Most death threats would be sent because either the sender is frustrated and probably doesn't have a good way with words, or just to get a reaction. Very, very few death threats are actually someone sending a legitimate threat. So I just wanted to stop that there. How do you feel about the idea that this is people just trying to communicate, like screaming out into the void, like, I can't use my words, so here are some terrible words that I looked up.
I think I Am an iPod makes a good point, which is statistically, we just have more voices out there. So of course we're going to hear more of the terrible stuff, as well as the good stuff. And in that case, statistically, you're going to get people who have trouble articulating themselves, and who are just going to boil it down to, right, I'm just going to say, I'll kill you, or this is terrible, and use what little grasp on the English language they have.
But if you have enough grasp on the English language to come up with a creative way of saying, I'm going to kill you, you also could just say your game sucks. Like, you could just give, like, terrible criticism like that. The idea that this is people, like, not being able to effectively communicate, that's a rationale that you can put on people who lash out in anger. I don't think you can make, like, death threats can be excused by saying, oh, this is people who just don't know how to process their feelings. Like, that's people who get angry. That's not people who send death threats.
Yeah, I think it's just been seen as I mentioned, the baseline of how angry can I get with someone.
Yeah.
And if they are furious about this, which, as we'll get to, it's not the thing to be the most furious about in the world, they just reach that bottom line and say, that's as far as I can push it.
Yeah, and also the comment here of very, very few death threats are actually someone sending a legitimate threat. I just go, like, it's true, but, like, does not excuse anything.
Does not excuse. If anything, it muddies the water
Exactly.
around the fact that if there is a legitimate death threat out there, it'll just be, camouflaged within this now acceptable, ability to send a death threat.
We're at the point now where you would rarely hear someone threaten someone else out loud, like saying that you're going to kill them. And we're now at the point where a presidential nominee kinda said that he wanted someone to kill the other presidential nominee. That's how clouded the death threat issue has gotten.
We're not looking for a future where it just becomes a casual part of the conversation.
Yeah, we just drop it in there.
I'll kill you.
You know how crap used to be like a word that like you would go, oh, I wouldn't say that around my parents, and now you can say it? We don't want to get there with death threats.
No.
But moving on with I Am an iPod. I think a certain level of entitlement is not only expected, but needed. Could you imagine ordering a steak sandwich with the lot, and then after an hour, receiving 2 bits of bread with spam in it? Then, if you complain, you get told that you're too entitled? Death threats would still be an overreaction, but my point still stands. Customers should feel entitled to receive what they are told they would get, and in a timely manner.
Number one, who orders a steak sandwich?
I do. What are you talking about?
You get a steak, or you get a nice sandwich.
Sometimes you feel like
All right. Before we get off topic,
Okay.
I think that
This will be a separate talk-through topic.
correct. I think what they're talking about there is saying entitlement around what they're expecting to be delivered to them versus entitlement of how that product is delivered to you.
Yeah.
And that was the big point I was making last night, is that a lot of these death threats are around the process of this game being made and being delivered, not so much the content within it. And I think that analogy therefore falls a little flat, because...
Are you talking about like the idea that they're not saying that, oh, why isn't there like great multiplayer in the game? They're saying that multiplayer has been something that you've talked about throughout this process.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, I'm not angry that you haven't put it in there, I'm angry that you spoke about multiplayer beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it's coming down to ticking off the list of the things that were promised in this game. It's more to do with the fact that there were the delays, the fact that there was a patch that went in there, which, look, changed some things, but I don't think it drastically changed the steak sandwich itself.
Yeah.
And so then people making threats over that kind of stuff is totally unjustified.
Yeah. And also, I would say with the steak sandwich thing, I see what you're trying to say, and I understand. The difference there is that you've ordered a product and you're waiting for that, you've paid for something and you're waiting to get it, and you know, like, you have an expectation of what that thing is because it's a steak sandwich, and then you get it. But with a game, that all of this is happening before the game is available to be bought.
Yeah.
Like, you haven't paid for anything yet, so you're not actually entitled to anything up until the moment you hand over money. And even then, you're buying a piece of art. So, like, what you're entitled to is that you get the thing and it like works.
To stay with the analogy, it's almost like asking the waiter, saying, look, surprise me with some form of meat and
Absolutely,
bread combination, and I'll judge it when it arrives.
And then you get a steak sandwich and you're really unhappy. And
like,
I get
"Oh, I
a
didn't
steak
want
sandwich
this."
and I'm like, more of this. So good. We went through that one. All right, our next comment comes in from Eva Izo, I'm gonna say. They say, just a question. How does this differ to the argument of more female protagonists are needed in games? Isn't that an entitled position? After all, you said towards the end, we should leave devs to it, or a committee of internet trolls will be involved. Does it only differ if you support the cause?
Ooh, it's an interesting one. It's a loaded one.
It is a loaded one because you said women.
I'll come straight out and say that I think there's a level of sensibility that has to be applied to what we're talking about here. And in the case of female protagonists, there is a general consensus in the population that that is a positive move forward.
Yeah.
Whereas-
We are actually like pushing a group of people down.
Yeah.
In all aspects of life and not just video games, and that it's time to rectify.
It's not just an agenda, it's not just a personal opinion that I'm like, I'd like to see more female protagonists.
You're not some controversial
No.
woman warrior.
It should be
Like
the way that
Xena.
society is moving. Whereas what we're talking about here in terms of the delays, Salt and Sanctuary being ported slowly, these are things that are happening, and there is a level of impatience with it that these people are angry about. And that is frustrating from the outside, because basically it's representing gamers as kids who can't wait to get their Christmas presents.
Yeah.
They're ripping the wrapping off, or they're just pissed that they can't get down there and shake the box.
And then sometimes they rip it off and they're angry because there's a woman in there. They're like, this isn't what I wanted.
So I don't think it applies as directly to the content of the game and what we feel entitled to seeing in games.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be entitled to see more women in games. I think it should be expected.
Yeah, and also, and again, I see what you're doing there, but I think the difference here is that I'm fairly certain most of the time when I talk about I would like to see more female protagonists, I'm not saying I would like you to make Marcus Phoenix a woman. Like, I would like to see Nathan Drake be a girl. Like, I'm just saying, in general, put women in games. Their own games. Make new games and fill those games with men and women, and it'll be fine.
And as I said, that doesn't sit side by side with, I want my No Man's Sky now.
Yeah.
I want it now, which is what we're seeing and what's been, taking over the internet.
And what an interesting transition, Goose Mangus. Because our next comment comes in from Muddy Mungo, who says the creators of No Man's Sky sold us a game they said was one thing, an exciting, all-action, do-whatever-you-want game, and then, hours before it was released, they suddenly changed their story and said it would actually be nothing like what they had previously stated, and most people didn't get to hear that in time. So, sorry, Muddy. Sorry, I am
People are
taking this-
driving to the shops to buy their coffee,
Yes,
and they're like,
wait! No! Turn on an FM!
like,
So really, they lied to the consumer and made a lot of money based on that lie, so a lot of people feel rightly cheated out of their hard-earned money. Hello Games knew exactly what they were doing, but they didn't care, and they gave us a crap, which you would never say in front of your parents 20 years ago, unfinished, glitchy, boring piece of horse manure. So although I agree that death threats are silly and childish and should never happen, Hello Games did kinda ask for it.
Ooh.
No one will ever trust them again. Give it to him.
Who is it? Muddy.
Right down the barrel.
You're wrong. You're so wrong. I shouldn't do this on the internet because this will just start a flame war, but you could not be more wrong.
You're wrong.
You're so wrong. Basically, what you're saying is that they applied a patch, a day one DLC patch, that changed the entire game as to a different game than what was promised.
Yeah.
Not true.
And also, like, I mean, I don't really know where to start here. If you're talking about stuff like the multiplayer, I mean, I see so many people talk about the multiplayer, right? I personally think that No Man's Sky would be a much better game if it had multiplayer. But I remember months ago, Sean Murray coming out and saying, you know, you can meet other people in the world, but the odds of it are so unlikely given the size of the universe.
He was so flippant about it in such sort of a this is still being made way that he never came out and said a concrete statement, there will be multiplayer, you can find your friends.
But when he's talking about when he is talking about multiplayer, he's talking about it in the sense that like it's so unlikely that it's going to happen. In my mind, I go, okay, that's not multiplayer then. Like there's no way that don't go into that thinking that's a multiplayer experience because the guy kept repeating himself saying it's very unlikely that you're going to do it.
And to go back and talk about the changes that were made that completely changed this game.
Yeah.
This game was being made the whole way through.
Yeah.
And so that day one patch, I believe, if you pulled it apart, it had some extra storyline paths.
Yeah, they
changed.
Yeah. So they added story paths.
Yeah.
They increased the size of like the galaxy, like the distance between things, like
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Yeah, like I mean, there's big fundamental changes in there.
But that game comes out, and there's only been like a small window where it was originally what it was. I doubt it was drastically different playing those two games. I mean, there were people who were getting their hands on it early and were saying, oh yeah, there are some changes here, but nothing that pulled No Man's Sky apart and re-put it back together as a completely different experience.
But also, like, there's actually a great article on Polygon a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about the process of certification and like how that is such an antiquated thing, but you need to get your game certified and go gold and get pressed and all this sort of stuff, and that the time that takes is so long that once you do it, you don't want to do anything to kind of like break that process. And that you might, and if you don't do it successfully, you need to do the whole thing again. So some companies do it earlier than normally they would to make sure that if there are any problems, they can do it again and get it completely done before the game's supposed to come out.
You've got a small team on this
And there's
one.
there's like 6 to 10 people, yeah. And so, but then it means that once it's gone like through that certification process, there's still weeks and weeks or potentially even months where they're still working on the game. And to think that like the patch is this reactionary thing, it's like, no, they just had more time to continue working on
They
it.
wanted to continue adding things to their game to give to us, and they thought we've got time to do it.
And the games that people got before the game came out, like the copies that they got that people were streaming and that guy finished and stuff, that's not the game. That's the game before the final patch came out, which is, the final patch is actually the cap on the game to go, okay, this is version 1. So they didn't take anything away from you or lie to you about this. It's like people were playing something that was unfinished and you're going, oh, that should be the final game. And that's just not true.
And this boils it all down to the problem, which is the amount of media we were consuming on about that game, which was because of social media, because of early copies, because of people streaming it, we were consuming that game before we got to play it.
Yeah.
And we were getting a lot of information about it, and we were very eager to consume all that information. And so basically when it boiled right down to the day that we got it, we not only had expectations, we'd seen things that we were expecting to get.
Yeah.
Whether that's a problem that the guys making the game needed to maybe, you know, restrict and stop showing us so much of the game and getting people's expectations so high and muddled, and then leave it to the day that you play the game to make that assessment. You know, I think they probably could have done it a little better, but they had Sony on their back telling them what to do.
What an interesting transition. Because now we get to Wayne Surratt. Wayne Surratt? Wayne Surratt. Sending death threats? No. Do we get overly hyped games? All the time. Do they deliver? Rarely. If game studios don't want a shitstorm of public and media focus on them, maybe they shouldn't call it down on themselves unless they really want it. Maybe try selling us on what they can deliver instead. So the argument here is you asked for this because like you made a giant deal out of this game. I would argue and it's all anecdotal, Hello Games didn't ask for this. Sony put this on Hello Games.
I would totally agree with that.
But beyond even that, it is very important to remember that anyone who is selling you a game, like a publisher, when they show you a game, they're not doing a public service to try to just like go, oh, here's a piece of information you might be interested in that this game is coming out. They're actively trying to make you buy something. They're trying to make you buy a product.
They want to pique your interest and they want to get you thinking, sure, this is something I could spend some of my life
Yeah.
putting hours into.
And while there's absolutely weird shades of this was mismarketed or they promised things that like were technically true but it looked a little dodgy, like you have to go into all marketing with a grain of salt. To think that any ad commercial sort of like gameplay hosted by the devs or whatever is there to show the game just so that you know about it and not to show the game in the best possible light it
or it's going to be the
possibly can
same way you're going to experience
Yeah,
that game.
totally.
And that with
particularly that game.
with a game like No Man's Sky, that is, you know, at the utmost importance because everyone's experience is, you know, meant to be so different from everyone else's that people are upset that they're not getting that opening of the game where they look at this planet and go, right, this is what I was expecting. I, for one, started staring at a brick wall.
That's true.
There was a cliff wall and the camera just panned past like dirt and a mountain. And I was like, if I'd been really excited for this game, which I was mildly, but if I'd put my whole life on pause to play this game, booted it up and then just stared at a cliff wall for the first 20 seconds,
Yeah.
I would have been
You would be
furious.
shattered, yeah.
So, yeah, you need to go, right, that's
Temper
how-
those expectations. Temper them.
Temper 'em
like
good.
chocolate. I don't really know what tempering chocolate is.
Not burning it.
Our final comment comes in from Nads.
Hey, Nads.
Testicles. It doesn't help that devs are bringing attention to these death threats and all that on social media or media outlets. What was the golden rule of the internet? Don't feed the trolls. I think devs should be applying this rule to themselves a bit more, and if they feel that some of these death threats are legit, report it to the right people. Don't go around advertising it on social media. It's just gonna open the bloody floodgates.
I'm sure they are reporting it. I hope they are. But do you think by putting it out on social media that more people are thinking, hey, death threats, that's something I might do? Or do you think that's sending the message out that that's more acceptable?
I actually think, and I'm gonna use a word here that will be like it implies way more than what we're talking about here, but I feel like this is victim shaming, that going like,
Yeah.
how dare you like say that you got a death threat, that you should just keep quiet and then let it go away. And I think that that's really easy for someone who isn't receiving hundreds and hundreds of death
Totally.
threats to say.
I'm being just blanket optimistic here, but I'd like to think that by putting it out on social media, more people are thinking that's a horrible thing. I'd like to see less people doing it.
Yeah.
I'll try and do the opposite, which was the point of the IMO in the end, which was to say, let's fight this with, you know, let's fight this love with hate.
Yeah, you said
Other way around. Let's fight this hate with love.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Let's go out there
that
and
one,
say
that one. Listen to the second one.
Let's say positive things to developers because it takes so much more energy to say something positive, especially on the internet, than to just go out there. It's so easy to write something negative than to go and actively hunt down a developer and say, I love what you did, or thank you for this.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I think you'll sort of quell those people making horrible, and easy to make death threats.
I totally agree, and I think that the whole community of beautiful freaks who watch Pocket are all about like bringing love and being accepting
Not
and
hate,
open.
love.
Not hate, love.
Yep.
This is why he's only half a Pocketeer, because sometimes he gets it wrong. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So that is all of your opinions and that we gave opinions on. And now, unfortunately, you don't get a chance to. Well, you do. You can leave your opinions in the comments below about what we just said, but we're not going to make another episode about
Keep them
those.
positive too.
Yeah, try to keep them positive, but if they are a negative, just know that we're never ever going to respond to them. All right, that is it for today's talk through and episode of Pocket My Pocketeers. But if you want to meet some of those gorgeous freaks I was talking about, then check out the Pocketeers Facebook group and Steam group. There are links to everything I just said in the description below. Goose, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Until next time, NichBoy out.
Goose out.
No, you've already said goodbye.
If you put steak in a sandwich,
Yeah.
it immediately just makes the bread soggy. It's like, if you want a well
If
done...
you're using Wonder White,
No, but if...
what about a nice sourdough?
No, because then there's those ones that you have to carve through with a knife and then you go and pick it up and you're sitting with your friends and
It's
you
a
bite into
steak!
it and it
What are
just
you
goes
talking
everywhere.
about?
Yeah, but it's in a sandwich form. This is why the whole problem exists.
You get like it's just it sort of falls apart and you got some barbecue, maybe some onions in there, because sometimes you want a steak but you don't have a plate. I'm right!